A Kano State High Court has directed the State Independent Electoral Commission to proceed with the conduct of the local government elections scheduled for Saturday, contrary to the ruling of a Federal High Court that stopped the elections from holding. Now let's bring in a lawyer and Arise analyst, Frank Tietie. Good to have you on News Night tonight. So here we are again, the courts of coordinate jurisdiction giving conflicting judgments on, in this case, the Kano local government elections. While the State High Court says, go ahead, any attempt to obstruct it will be, null and void. And the Federal High Court says, no, you don't go ahead. I mean...
I think we've been quite kind to the judiciary when we keep looking at these issues, keep coming up and appearing to be sounding like broken record. I think it's time to actually call out the judiciary directly as being, in this case, the author of confusion. Now, politicians will always be who they are. In the quest for control of political power, they're bound to carry on some form of excesses and all that. And then the role of the judiciary is actually to ensure that their conflicts and all sort of confusion are resolved. But in this case, we have seen too many times as news analysts, as news watchers, and then as even participants in the whole process, realizing that this issue of judicial misadventure is becoming unbearable. And so in this particular case, we can't imagine that democracy as we have it, as we presently practiced in the last decade, has actually been bedeviled by these forms of uncertainties flowing from the judiciary. This case being in point, and to think that this is often what we deprecate all the time. That I must commend Ariwola, because he did make attempt in his twilight in office when he set up a committee to be headed by former Chief Justice of Nigeria, Walter Onoke, to bring up models on how to avoid these forms of conflicting judgments. Yeah. It's unfortunate that nothing came out from that committee. I didn't hear it was dissolved, but I also didn't hear that it came out with any form of work. What you must appreciate is that these are constitutional issues. Constitutional in the sense that once any court makes an order, it must be enforced by any person, any authority or person in the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And I'm speaking specifically to Section 287 of the Constitution. In that case, why would you know that there is a subsisting court order on a subject matter, however wrong it is, then you go and make a direct conflicting order to that particular judgment or order? It's just an invitation to confusion. But we must not forget one personality, and I've attempted to actually bring him up. And I'm not talking about the Attorney General of the Federation. He is not he may be a minister of government. He doesn't have to be a minister of justice, but he is Attorney General of the Federation, the chief law officer. That's how the Supreme Court describes him. So there are times, oftentimes like this, that personality should come and say, this is what the law is, and this is what we should enforce, and this is what we should not enforce. We can't keep subjecting our judiciary to this mockery by these persons who operate as judges with all sorts of ulterior motives, and who can often be compromised by either pressure or one thing or the other.
Well, is there any form of legality? Because I think you've just brought up something that a lot of people haven't thought of. The chief legal officer superintends, but his comments on this, how forceful will that be, knowing full well that we're talking about court's judgment?
Look, I think we have underutilized and underestimated the powers of the personality of the Attorney General of the Federation. Because we're talking about a chief law officer. Those are not my words. Those are the words of the Constitution. Meaning that instead of subjecting judicial decisions and determinations to debates and often news analysis, as we often do here, the personality of the Attorney General oftentimes should be the one pointing out that this is what the law is at every material time in this country. And if there is any conflict to what he's saying, go to court. And when the court has so said, he has a mandate in pursuant to Section 287 and particularly to his massive powers under Section 150 and 174, to now say this is the direction. And look, I haven't seen the Attorney General make such kind of, direct and strong pronouncement or taking positions, whether in Kano State or in Rivers State crisis, whether it has to do with the members of the House of Assembly, or even in the case of Kano with regards to the who should be the proper emir in Kano. Right. Now, don't forget that he's not the Attorney General of APC, he's not the Attorney General of Nigeria as we speak, he's the Attorney General of the Federation, which means every matter of law, whether it has to do with a local government that has assumed some measure of national interest, it should be of much importance to him that he cannot turn a blind eye to. This is a good example of where judges have now disregarded that the sanctity of the powers that they exercise. In this case, from Kano, which is becoming very, very embarrassing.
We have a new Chief Justice, CJN, who in her inaugural speech actually pointed out that some of these excesses will be, zero tolerated. Does she have any role here? What should the CJN be doing right now to ensure that these excesses are checked? And you have talked about reforms, the need for judicial reforms. Where do we need to start these reforms from?
These problems are not new.
Right.
And the current Chief Justice of Nigeria has been part of the system, has been a Justice of the Supreme Court, and actually well versed and very much acquainted with these problems. One thing I'll talk about underestimating the powers of the Attorney General. We should not overestimate the powers of the Chief Justice of Nigeria, because she is just one person, exercising judicial powers, even though she heads many judicial agencies and bodies that can actually make impact. But these are constitutional issues. Right. For us to make any lasting and fundamental judicial reforms, it has to come from the National Assembly. Imagine when we deal with cases that have to do with delays, undue delays that actually have denied and defeated justice in this country. The National Assembly only needed to make up its mind in its area of interest, that is, it has to do with political cases, and it simply set limits. So the average Nigerian I hate to say this, has lost a large measure of confidence in Nigerian judiciary. And for us to restore that confidence, it has to come from actually law reform first. We have to have some amendment. You have to amend the Constitution. For example, look at Section 194 of the Constitution. 294 of the Constitution, which mandates the judges to write in longhand. In terms of giving reasons for, in the way they present their judgment. That is a clog in itself. It causes some forms of delay. And then look at the chicaneries and the political process, because it's about politics, law, and justice. The political processes and the cheap, the tactics that have been adopted by either senior lawyers or scrupulous lawyers to delay cases. So we are very much aware of all the problems. However, it is that strength of resolve on the part of those who really govern the system, particularly the National Assembly, the Senate President, and the Speaker of the House of Representatives, going after, having a coalition with other speakers and with governors to say, look, we can have a better system. The way they did it for themselves with regards to electoral matters, they can do it in other issues too. It's a matter of constitutional amendments.
Sadly, let's talk about political influence, because everyone you've just named somehow the members of a political party, and what we smell here seem to be some kind of political influence leading up to such conflicting judgments or orders. How best do you think that these reforms can actually be activated without these political actors also interfering?
Because they are beneficiaries of the current dysfunctionality that we have in this country, it's going to be very difficult for us to have the reforms. These reforms have been called for more than 10 years ago. They've been professors, and we have National Judicial Institutes and conferences all over this country being held by the foreign, supported conferences and all sort of interventions. They know the right thing to do, but those who benefit from it are the ones who actually have the responsibility of doing it, and they don't want to do it. They did it for themselves with regards to giving time limits for election cases, but the same way they can do it with regards to giving the sense of confidence, a sense of the judicial system that is ready to actually provide justice for the Nigerian people. As we speak now, the judiciary has a problem, and our country is headed for a very terrible direction. And I hate to say it, because the goal of the judiciary is nothing else but to resolve conflicts, because they are bound to come, because you have a lot of rascals who run in the political terrain. It is the responsibility of the judges in this cause to now railroad them on the path of law, legality, and democracy. But when you now see those who are supposed to guard the system, because they are there quiet, they are there, there is no judge in these matters, whether in Kano, Rivers State, or elsewhere, that has less than 20 years experience of the practice of law. Now, to think that these persons will now apply their knowledge of law to subverting the system, then you must realize that we are faced with a political emergency. Now, It's a very serious matter. But what it calls for is some truths, especially on the part of the president, on the part of the CJN, on the part of Akpabio and the speaker, to say, look, please, we can save this system, we can save this democracy. Absolutely. Let us try a bit. But if we continue like this, I'm afraid we might just have some form of implosion.
It looks like what you're saying is, as far as the judiciary is concerned, the beautiful ones are not yet born.
Unfortunately so.
We'll have to leave it there.